Japan is pledging continued solidarity with other G7 nations in regards to supporting Ukraine. The country believes security in Europe and the Indo-Pacific region are inseparable in light of Russia's aggression and China's reluctance to criticise Moscow. Euronews has been talking to senior government figure Koichiro Matsumoto on the importance of Japan being at the summit.
The Japanese Prime Minister is here at the G7. You see a lot more, I suppose, stronger relations between Japan and the EU and the West and so on. Tell us a little bit about why that's being built at this time.
Prime Minister has been saying that Ukraine today can be East Asia tomorrow. So based on this understanding, we are trying to forge a much deeper relationship with our European counterparts. And this is the reason why we have been invited to the NATO summit the day after tomorrow.
Talk us through, I suppose, one of the priorities here at the G7 is to coordinate sanctions. What is Japan's position on sanctions, global sanctions against Russia at this point?
Thank you for asking that. One of the very big aim of Prime Minister Kishida coming to Elmau is to apply a more stricter sanction vis-à-vis Russia so as to help the Ukrainians. So we are supportive of various sanctions, collective sanctions, and I think you're probably implying this oil price cap, which is being discussed elsewhere. We haven't come up with a concrete G7 agreement on this, so I will not go into details. But by and large, I think generally speaking, I think we can be supportive of the idea of this cap, because this is, targeting the Russian energy revenue. And whilst keeping the stability of the energy market. So we would like to see more concrete mechanism to be explained from the other G7 countries.
Well, talk us through, I suppose, Japan's energy situation. Did it ever take energy from Russia, gas or oil? Is it then now sanctioning and then obviously suffering somewhat from trying to find other producers?
In terms of oil, we stopped transporting Russian oil from Sakhalin project from April. That's one. And another thing is that our dependency on natural gas, LNG, is approximately 9% of the total imports of Japan. And we are trying to reduce this dependency from Russian energy dependency here. And in terms of coal, we are gradually reducing the coal imports. And as of May, we reduced by 43% compared that to the same month last year.
It's interesting when you hear from, let's say, the likes of India, from China, from others, they say they're not going to maybe get involved with the sanctions because this is a regional conflict. But Japan isn't taking that position. Why?
Well, it's because we're like-minded nations with other G7 members. G7 is about like-minded membership. Unlike other some international grouping, but G7 has always been like-minded partners, and whenever there is a kind of this kind of historic situation when you have one country aggressing neighbor without being provoked. What is very important is the like-mindedness, because we can show the unity and we can apply strict sanctions with all these other like-minded partners.
I want to get on to NATO in a second, but one of the initiatives already confirmed at this G7 is, of course, the, I suppose, counter to the China Belt and Road Initiative. 600 billion euros announced on Sunday evening. Tell us a bit about why that's important in terms of countering China's influence, and what do you see it working out as?
We don't sort of frame it that way. this is a kind of a counter initiative vis-a-vis Belt and Road Initiative of that kind. What we are trying to say is that, okay, well, there has been some examples of development financing which goes beyond the debt sustainability. There are some eye-frowning cases in which debt sustainability was quite ignored. I think G7 needs to come up with a better deal with those developing countries who are willing to, enrich their countries with the developing finance.
Do you think that's possible? I mean, do you think perhaps this is a little bit too late because China has been doing this for so long that it already has quite a strong grip? It's very hard for certain countries to maybe move away from that.
Well, better late than never, is it not? President Biden was very eager, and as you mentioned, he committed that surprising amount of money, and we are following suit. We are sort of at the moment, we are gradually sort of coming to understand that many developing countries are craving for other options provided by the Western countries, like-minded countries.
One other issue for the US and the EU is, of course, countering the aggression of China globally. What's Japan's perspective on this? And when it comes to, I suppose, human rights concerns, trade concerns, China's relationship with Russia?
Well, okay, so let's tackle this issue of Russo-Chinese issue. On the very day when we hosted a Quad meeting in May, we invited the Indian Prime Minister, Australian Prime Minister, and the US President to Japan, Tokyo. The Russians and the Chinese bomber jets did a sort of joint flight from the Sea of Japan all the way to Pacific Ocean. And we lodged a strong protest to these two countries. And of course, as you well remember, on the eve of Beijing Olympic Games, there was a summit meeting between Russia and China, and they agreed to sort of go against or oppose the NATO expansion to the east. So we are seeing some instances such as that, and we are seeing a lot of appalling atrocities being conducted by the Russians, and we are, and the Chinese are sort of, making such efforts to sort of side with Russia, and we are sort of calling for more responsible actions from China.
Interestingly, Joe Biden at the last NATO summit in Brussels had said that there should be secondary sanctions against countries like China if they are very obvious in their support of Russia. Would Japan support something like that?
Well, I don't want to sort of discuss the hypotheticals here, but I think the importance of this issue, let's say, of Russia and China, forging kind of a cordial relationship is, being felt quite worldwide, wasn't it?
Tell us about Russia-Japanese relations up until now, historically, but also, I suppose, from a trade point of view and also a cultural point of view. Yes,
historical point of view, many people forget or do not know the fact that Russians and the Japanese are neighbors. The northern parts of islands, which is called, we call them the Northern Territories, they are illegally occupied by Russia since 1945 till today, and the size of which is approximately 85 times bigger than the island of Manhattan. So this is a very big chunk of land and still illegally occupied. And we surrendered on the 15th of August 1945, but Russians continued. Well, at the time it was Soviet Union, but they continued their offensive even after our surrender, and they occupied these territories illegally, and they're holding those islands until today.